They told you Lucifer was evil, that he was the devil himself, the fallen one, the deceiver, the serpent in the garden, and the ruler of hell. But what if that was never the truth? What if that version of the story was engineered not to enlighten, but to control? From the moment you first heard the name Lucifer, it was wrapped in fear, associated with rebellion, sin, and exile. But before he was demonized, before the myths were rewritten and sacred texts burned, Lucifer was something else entirely. Lucifer means light bringer, not dark one, not devourer of souls. The name itself, from lux, light, and fair, to bring, literally means the one who brings the light. That changes everything. Before the church stamped him with horns and flames, Lucifer represented something far more powerful: illumination, divine knowledge, and the courageous impulse to awaken. He wasn't a devil, he was a symbol, a frequency, a spark of consciousness that dares to question authority and seek truth beyond dogma. But that's dangerous, because a being or archetype that inspires you to think for yourself, to ask forbidden questions, to see the divine not just in heaven, but within yourself, that being would threaten every structure built on blind obedience. So they rewrote him. They turned the light bringer into the prince of darkness. They fused his myth with Satan, with hell, with eternal punishment. They took a symbol of sovereignty and made it a warning, and most of us never even questioned it. But if Lucifer was the enemy of ignorance, not of God, if he was cast out not for evil but for shining too brightly, then what was really being hidden? The truth is this: Lucifer was never about evil. He was about awakening. He represents the moment you refuse to be kept in the dark, the moment you choose inner knowing over imposed belief, the moment light enters the room and illusion falls apart. That's why the name was buried under centuries of shame, because the Lucifer myth doesn't just challenge theology, it threatens control. Look at the original texts. The Book of Isaiah 14:12 is where the term Lucifer first appears, but not as a devil. In its original context, it refers to a fallen Babylonian king, a mortal ruler brought down by pride. The Latin word Lucifer was used in the Vulgate translation, meaning morning star, and over time it was recast, repurposed, and weaponized. Later, church doctrine would blend this with the story of the fallen angel from Ezekiel 28, who once walked among the stones of fire before being cast down. From there, the myth morphed, line by line, translation by translation. Lucifer became the scapegoat for everything forbidden, and the keeper of truths no one was allowed to speak. But the mystics knew better. The Gnostics, Hermetists, and early esoteric Christians saw Lucifer not as an enemy, but as a misunderstood force, a cosmic mirror of humanity's own fall and rise. Not a villain, but a carrier of potential. Not a demon, but a symbol of the inner spark. The tragedy isn't just that Lucifer was misunderstood. It's that by demonizing him, they also demonized something within you: the seeker, the rebel, the one who remembers. Because when you awaken, when you question, when you feel that sacred fire rising, you become uncontrollable. You begin to embody exactly what the myth was trying to warn against: divine sovereignty. And so, Lucifer was buried not beneath the earth, but beneath centuries of fear, distortion, and doctrine. But now, the Lightbringer returns, not to lead you astray, but to lead you inward, to remind you that the darkness was never something to fear. It was just the absence of your own understanding. The true heresy was never in worshiping evil. It was in daring to awaken the light within. And maybe, just maybe, That's what Lucifer always stood for. Before the name Lucifer was twisted, before it was used as a weapon, before it became synonymous with evil, it was sacred. Lucifer, the morning star, the bearer of light, the one who rose in brilliance before the dawn. In the ancient world, the morning star Venus was seen not as a curse, but as a symbol of hope, a guide that appeared in the darkest sky, heralding the coming of the sun. That's the archetype Lucifer once embodied. Not darkness, but transition from night to day, ignorance to awareness, sleep to awakening. He wasn't a devil, he was an initiator, a being, or rather, an energy associated with knowledge, freedom, and the raw, sometimes uncomfortable process of waking up. In esoteric traditions, Lucifer was a symbol of conscious evolution, the moment the soul seeks more than comfort and demands truth, even if it costs everything. Not in rebellion against divinity, but in alignment with its deeper essence. Lucifer didn't fall from the heavens because he was evil. He descended because he chose clarity over conformity. The story goes deeper than the church ever wanted you to know. In Gnostic texts, there's a pattern. The one who brings knowledge is always demonized. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent wasn't just a tempter, it was the revealer, the one who offered awareness, the one who whispered, "You are more than they told you." And what did the divine say? Now they are like us, knowing good and evil. That moment, that choice, was the first spark of sovereignty. Lucifer's myth mirrors this, not because he was evil, but because he offered what power structures always fear: illumination. Not the light that blinds, but the one that reveals. Not control, but clarity. Not submission, but truth. In esoteric Christianity, Lucifer wasn't an enemy of Christ. He was a shadow of the same flame. Both are referred to as the morning star in different texts. Both descend, both illuminate, both bring a kind of spiritual fire. But one is worshipped, and the other is condemned. Why? Because Lucifer reminds us of a truth we're not supposed to touch, that the divine is not locked away in heaven, not owned by institutions, it's inside you. And if people realize that, if they stop outsourcing their power, if they begin to embody their own light, systems fall. To the mystics, Lucifer was the archetype of divine disobedience, not as destruction, but as the refusal to remain blind. In Kabbalistic mysticism, there's the concept of the divine fall, the shattering of the vessels, the descent of sparks into the material world, not as a mistake, but as a necessary stage of creation. Lucifer, in this context, is not a villain. He is a sacrifice of light into density. He descends so that others may ascend. He carries the flame into the darkness. He is not separate from God. He is the forgotten face of God, the one who says, "I will descend so that others may rise." And what about us? We've been taught to fear the fall, to see descent as punishment. But maybe the fall is part of the cycle. Maybe awakening isn't about escaping the world, but moving through it, integrating light and shadow, above and below. Lucifer is that force, the spark that descends, not to dominate, but to awaken, to bring light into the darkest places within us. The fall, then, is not failure, it's initiation. So before the doctrine, before the damnation, Lucifer was a symbol of the courage to see, to question, to descend into matter, to awaken others with the fire he carried. And for that, he was labeled a threat. But what if he was never fallen? What if he jumped? What if the devil you fear was never a devil at all? What if he was rebranded? Not because he was evil, but because he was powerful. Not because he led people into darkness, but because he dared to lead them out of it. This is the uncomfortable truth. Lucifer's fall was never just a myth. It was a message rewritten by institutions that feared the light more than the dark. Because the real danger wasn't a horned beast ruling from fire. The real danger was awakening. When you control the narrative, you control perception. And when you control perception, you control people. In the early centuries of Christianity, the Roman Church wasn't just translating scripture, it was shaping reality. Doctrines weren't written to free the soul, they were crafted to contain it. And one of the most effective tools of containment: take the symbols of inner power and make them terrifying. The name Lucifer appears once in the entire Bible, Isaiah 14:12, and even that was never meant to refer to a cosmic being of evil. It described a fallen Babylonian king, arrogant, prideful, mortal, not an angel, not a devil. The Latin Vulgate translated Hillel ben Shahar, meaning shining one, son of the dawn, into Lucifer. But over centuries, something subtle happened. That name originally, a poetic reference to the morning star, was merged with Satan, and it stuck. Suddenly, a metaphor for brightness and downfall became a literal figure of eternal evil. But ask yourself, who benefits from that confusion? Who gains power when the bringer of light is turned into the ruler of hell? The term Satan means adversary. It's not a proper name, it's a role. In the Old Testament, Satan is more of a celestial prosecutor than an embodiment of evil. He tests, challenges, asks questions. He exists within the divine order, not outside it. But by the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, theological simplicity was more useful than nuance. Lucifer, Satan, serpent, enemy, all fused into one. By the 4th century, the Church had consolidated spiritual complexity into a singular villain. Why? Because if you want to build a system based on obedience, you need two things. 1. A God to obey. 2. A devil to fear. And if the devil is the one who brings light, who questions, who seeks knowledge, then seeking becomes sin, curiosity becomes rebellion, and awakening becomes heresy. The rebranding of Lucifer didn't happen by accident. It was systematic. Gnostic gospels gone, Hermetic texts silenced, esoteric Christianity outlawed, priestesses, mystics, and alchemists erased or executed. What was left? A tightly controlled narrative, a story that says light only comes from obedience. That questioning is dangerous. That salvation is external, and that anything within you that seeks deeper truth must be from the devil. But the real devil was the distortion. The original story was far more empowering and far more dangerous to empire. Lucifer, in his original archetype, challenges the hierarchy, not to destroy it, but to decentralize it. He says, you don't need a priest, you don't need a temple, you don't need a gatekeeper between you and the divine. You are the temple. You are the light. You are the one you've been waiting for. That's the kind of idea that collapses empires. So they labeled it blasphemy, and they labeled him evil, and they taught you to fear the fire, when all along the fire was yours. But now the spell is breaking. People are asking again, reading again, remembering again. And Lucifer is being seen not as the devil, but as the mirror. The mirror that reflects our own fall, our own courage, our own rising light. Because in the end, the greatest deception wasn't that Lucifer fell, it's that you believed you had to stay in the dark because he did. There's a reason your Bible looks the way it does. There's a reason it only tells part of the story. And it's not because the rest was irrelevant. It's because the rest was too dangerous, too illuminating, too liberating, too close to the truth. The church didn't just preserve sacred knowledge, it edited it, it redacted, it redefined, and it erased whole gospels, entire lineages of teachings, lost not to time but to intentional suppression. And at the center of this forgotten wisdom lies a figure far more complex than the devil we were handed. Lucifer, as light-bringer, appears not just in hidden theology, but between the lines of esoteric Christianity. If you want to find him, you have to look where the church told you not to, and ask the questions you were never supposed to ask. In 1945, buried in a clay jar beneath the sands of Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a series of ancient texts were uncovered, texts that had been missing for over 1,600 years. These were the Gnostic Gospels, and their contents were explosive. They didn't portray salvation as something earned through obedience or dogma. They said salvation came through gnosis, inner knowing. They said the kingdom of God was within you, and that the divine spark, the light, lived in every human being. They also introduced a strange idea that the God of the Old Testament may not have been the highest divine force, but a false creator, a demiurge, a being who trapped souls in illusion. Who was the one who tried to break that illusion? The one who brought knowledge? Sound familiar? In many Gnostic myths, it is the light-bringer, sometimes as the serpent, sometimes as Sophia, the divine wisdom who reveals the truth and offers awakening. They weren't worshiping darkness. They were reclaiming what had been hidden, that enlightenment was internal, and that institutional religion was never the gate to heaven. It was the gate away from it. In the Gospel of Thomas, one of the most famous Gnostic texts, Jesus says, "If those who lead you say to you, 'Look, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds will get there first. If they say, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will get there first. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you." That sounds like someone breaking open the system, not enforcing it. That sounds Luciferian. Because the true essence of Lucifer and of the Christ in Gnostic tradition is the same: to awaken, to illuminate, to remember. But the church couldn't allow that version to spread. So these texts were labeled heresy, banned, burned, hidden away in vaults beneath cathedrals, or buried in desert caves by those trying to preserve the truth. Esoteric Christianity wasn't built on fear, sin, or shame. It was built on frequency, on vibration, on direct experience with the divine. The early mystics taught that the Christ wasn't a historical figure to be worshipped, but a state of consciousness to be embodied. They practiced breathwork, sound resonance, sacred geometry, light work. They knew the body was a temple and that the soul was a bridge. In many of these teachings, Lucifer was not separate from Christ. They were two faces of one flame: descent and ascension, rebellion and resurrection, fall and rise. Where one represented the descent into matter, the forgetting, the other represented the return to spirit, the remembering. Both were necessary, both were sacred, and both were buried. Because if you awaken without permission, no one can control you. If you discover God inside you, you stop kneeling to institutions. If you realize that light and dark are two sides of one coin, you stop fearing the cycle and start mastering it. Lucifer, as lightbringer, threatens the foundation of spiritual obedience. He invites self-initiation. And for the Vatican and every empire built upon belief, that's the true heresy. There are rumors of more texts locked deep within the Vatican's secret archive, the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum. Millions of documents, some never seen by public eyes, some dating back over 1,000 years. What's inside? Many believe there are early Christian writings that paint Lucifer as a misunderstood figure, or Hermetic scrolls that merge Christ and the Lightbringer as aspects of the same logos, or evidence that the serpent in Eden wasn't a villain but a liberator. We don't know for sure, but we know this. When truth is buried, it's never because it's irrelevant, it's because it's powerful. There is a reason the myth of Lucifer has never faded. It lingers, pulses in the shadows of our culture, appearing in literature, in films, in whispered warnings. But beneath the fear, beneath the doctrine, lies a truth too deep to silence. Lucifer is not just a figure in theology, he is an archetype in the soul. The fall of Lucifer is not just a cosmic event, it is a story we live again and again. Every soul at some point chooses descent, a choice to leave behind comfort and illusion in pursuit of something real. It's not a punishment, it's not exile, it's a calling, a sacred spiral downward, not into sin, but into self, into embodiment, into forgetting, so that we might one day remember. That is the true mystery of Lucifer, not as a devil, but as the symbol of the journey from divine unity into separation, and then, ultimately, back into wholeness. You see, awakening does not begin in the heavens. It begins in the dark, in the places we were told not to look. It begins when you start to question why you were taught to fear what you once knew as light. When you look at the shame, the trauma, the silence, and walk through it anyway. Lucifer is that spark within you, that part of your soul that dares to fall, that dares to enter the maze of matter, of ego, of pain, not because it wants to be lost, but because it seeks to transform. The real fall was never about pride. It was about potential. The potential to know yourself through contrast, to discover light through shadow, to remember divinity not because you were told, but because you lived the absence of it. Lucifer represents the soul's courageous descent into limitation in order to reclaim its power from within. This is why the myth echoes so deeply in those who feel they don't belong. The ones who have always felt like outsiders. The ones who question everything. The ones who carry a light they cannot explain and a pain they can't quite name. It's because your journey is not linear. It spirals, like the stars, like DNA, like the fall and rise of ancient truths buried inside you. You are not broken. You are remembering. Lucifer's descent is your descent. His exile is your feeling of alienation from the divine. His fall is the very structure of incarnation forgetting, so you can truly know. But here's what they never told you. The fall isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the return. The true power of the Lightbringer is not in the fall, but in the rising. In the moment the spark begins to reignite. In the realization that everything you thought was lost has always been inside you. This is why mystics across traditions have seen the story not as literal, but as symbolic. The serpent, the morning star, the flame in the dark, all representations of the soul's inner rebellion against delusion. Lucifer is the flicker that says, there's more than this. Don't settle for half-truths. Don't shrink to fit into someone else's version of holiness. And when that flicker is followed, it becomes a blaze, a path, a remembering. You begin to walk differently, not in obedience, but in presence, not in fear of judgment, but in awe of what you are. You start to recognize that your thoughts shape reality, that your voice carries frequency, that your being is not separate from the source, it is a fractal of it. This is what the fall was always about, not shame, but initiation. It was the soul's invitation to move from innocence to awareness, from being held by the divine to becoming it, not by ascending into heavens far away, but by awakening the heavens already within. This is the alchemy of light and shadow. And Lucifer in his true form is not your enemy in that process. He is the signal that it's time to wake up, the whisper that says, you don't need to be saved. You need to remember. He is not the one keeping you from the divine. He is the moment you realize that divinity was never outside you to begin with. When you stop fearing your light, when you stop hiding your questions, when you stop apologizing for the sacred fire within you, you begin to rise. And in that rising, you begin to see the fall was never a curse. It was the doorway. You've heard the phrase, history is written by the victors. But in the case of spiritual truth, it's often not written at all. It's hidden. Deep beneath the Vatican, beneath the marble halls, the grand cathedrals, the sculptures, and the stained glass lies a vault. A literal underground archive known as the Vatican Apostolic Archive, once called the Archivum Secretum. The word secretum doesn't mean forbidden in Latin. It means private. But let's be honest, the difference is thin when access is denied to almost everyone. Inside that archive are over 50 miles of shelves, thousands of years of documents, ancient texts, letters, artifacts, forbidden knowledge. What could possibly be so dangerous, so volatile, that it must be locked away? Many believe the answer is this: the original teachings about Lucifer and the divine truths buried with him. The church didn't just rewrite his story, it erased the alternatives. It outlawed the mystics, burned the books, and buried what couldn't be destroyed. There are whispers of scrolls hidden in those vaults, gospels that paint Lucifer not as an enemy of God, but as a misunderstood force. Texts that link him to ancient cosmology, to the fallen watchers of the Book of Enoch, records of mystical sects that taught Lucifer as the inner spark, not a fallen angel, but a divine initiator, a revealer. Why were these texts hidden? Because they don't support the narrative, because they don't serve obedience, because they invite freedom. Imagine if the world knew Lucifer was never Satan, that the light-bringer was a metaphor for illumination, not damnation, that the entire cosmology of sin and punishment was constructed not for salvation, but for control. Would you still kneel? Would you still obey? Would you still fear your own awakening? This is why the Vatican vaults remain locked, not because they protect the truth, but because they protect power from the truth. Scholars and insiders have tried to peer inside. A few have seen fragments, letters from ancient popes, accounts of early councils where gospels were chosen and others were cast out, not for inaccuracy, but for heresy. And heresy, as it turns out, often just means knowledge that threatens structure. In the 4th century, the Council of Nicaea determined what books would define Christianity. Everything else was excluded. Many of those banned texts carried not only alternate views of Jesus, but clues veiled and symbolic about the Lightbringer. Some connected Lucifer to the fallen angels of the Book of Enoch, those who came down and shared forbidden wisdom with humanity, healing, astrology, sacred names, the workings of the stars. If that sounds familiar, it's because it is. knowledge as sin, illumination as rebellion, light as heresy. It's the same pattern over and over again. Throughout history, empires have tried to control the flame by containing it, and when that failed, by demonizing it. The Vatican vaults are not just about paper, they are about memory, and the suppression of memory is one of the oldest tools of power. But the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Today, the light bringer rises not through forbidden texts alone, but through resonance, through intuition, through souls waking up and remembering what they were never taught. You don't need access to the vault to feel it. You've always known there was more. That feeling, that sense that something doesn't add up, that deeper truths lie beneath the official story that is Lucifer, whispering through the cracks in the narrative. Not seducing you into evil, inviting you into awareness. He isn't locked in a cage beneath heaven. He's in the silence between verses, in the burned pages, in the archives they won't let you read. Lucifer lives in the questions no one's allowed to ask. And maybe you're here because you've started asking them anyway. The greatest deception wasn't turning Lucifer into a villain. It was convincing you that the light he carried was not yours to hold. For centuries, humanity has been taught to look outward for divinity, to seek truth in temples, salvation in systems, and permission from men in robes. But the deeper spiritual traditions, the ones buried beneath dogma and fear, whisper a different message. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The light you seek has always been yours. This is the secret Lucifer represents, and the reason he had to be buried under fear. Because Lucifer is not the enemy of God. He is the enemy of control. He is the archetype of divine sovereignty, the force that reminds you that you do not need to be saved, you need only to remember. And that is dangerous to any structure that depends on your disempowerment. Remembering Lucifer isn't about worship. It isn't about rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's about peeling back the layers of manipulation that taught you to fear your own light. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself that were shamed, silenced, and exiled just like him. To remember Lucifer is to remember that you are more than a follower. You are a flame, a conscious emanation of Source, capable of knowing, choosing, creating. That's why the church needed Lucifer to fall, not just in the story, but in your mind. Because if you associate questioning with evil, if you associate knowledge with danger, if you associate inner power with pride, and pride with sin, then you will never rise. You will never ask. You will never remember. You'll keep seeking light in others while being told to fear the one within, and you'll call that obedience. But Lucifer is the crack in that illusion, the flash of insight that says, wait, maybe the story is upside down. Maybe the one they called the deceiver was actually trying to show you what had been hidden. Maybe what you thought was rebellion was actually remembrance. Because what is the light if not clarity? What is illumination if not awareness? What is awakening if not the refusal to stay asleep? That is Lucifer. And once you remember that, you stop playing the role they assigned you. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop waiting for external validation. You begin to trust your intuition again. You begin to create, speak, question, explore. You begin to embody the very thing they warned you about. And that's the point. Lucifer was never about a battle between good and evil. He was a mirror, a symbol of the soul's descent into forgetting and its power to return to truth. To reclaim Lucifer is to reclaim your own fall and rise. to stop hiding from your brilliance, to stop apologizing for your light, to stop confusing humility with suppression. Because humility is not dimming your flame. It's knowing your flame doesn't make anyone else's smaller. You were never meant to fear that light. You were meant to live it. That's what remembering Lucifer unlocks: not darkness, but clarity; not rebellion, but sovereignty. A quiet, unmistakable sense that you are no longer waiting to be told who you are. You remember. And once you do, no institution can define you. No dogma can contain you. No fear can control you. Because when you reclaim the light within, you become everything they were afraid of. In the end, all stories lead here, not to a battle between angels and demons, but to a quiet moment, a decision, a choice that no one else can make for you. Not heaven or hell, not good or evil, but something far more personal. Will you obey or will you awaken? This has always been the heart of the Lucifer story. Not a war in the clouds, but a war in consciousness, a tension between staying small, safe, accepted, or stepping into a light that no one gave you permission to hold. Lucifer's myth was never about a singular being falling from the sky. It was about you, about all of us. The moment you begin to question, the moment you feel the stir inside, asking, what if there's more? The moment you realize that light, real light, doesn't come from following rules, but from remembering who you are. That is illumination. But there is a cost, because awakening doesn't always feel like bliss. It often feels like collapse. The collapse of old beliefs, of false identities, of the safe world you were taught to accept. And that's why most choose obedience. Because it's easier. It's easier to live in a system that tells you what to think, who to be, how to pray, where to look for God, as long as it means you never have to truly look within. Obedience offers comfort, but illumination offers truth. And truth will always shake the ground beneath your feet before it sets you free. That's why Lucifer fell, not because he was evil, but because he chose truth over comfort. He chose freedom over favor. He chose to bring light to where it was not welcome. And that choice was cast as rebellion. But now you're here, and the same choice stands before you. Will you repeat the story or rewrite it? Will you follow the script or follow the light? Because the truth is, this myth has never been about worshiping Lucifer. It's about becoming what he represents. Not blind rebellion, not arrogance, but unshakable remembrance. The courage to see through illusion, the fire to illuminate shadow, the willingness to walk alone, if that's what it takes to walk in truth. This is what the church feared. Not a monster, not a demon, but a mind that can no longer be controlled. A heart that listens inward, a soul that no longer bows to systems designed to keep it asleep. You were taught to fear Lucifer, so you would never follow the path he walked. But maybe that path was never about destruction. Maybe it was always about returning to the divine, not through obedience, but through knowing. And now the question is no longer about theology. It's about you. You can choose to obey, to stay in the lines, to silence the voice that's been whispering since before you could name it. Or you can choose to remember, not who they told you to be, but who you've always been. A bearer of light, a spark of truth, a soul that fell not because it was broken, but because it was brave enough to experience the dark and still carry the flame. You are not here to submit. You are here to awaken. And now, you choose.